Hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now. We are live with the Council of Tolkien. I know you can't see Matt and Sid just yet. I'm going to be fixing that as soon as I get done promoing across Discord here, because last month doing this with my phone was not the most ideal situation. There we go. Alright, and if I go back here, we could turn you guys back on. Let's see. There you have a Sid. We have a Matt. Hello, everyone. We are live, and I'm going to say it again. We are live, because I'm sure in 5 minutes Matt's going to say, when do we go live? Oh, come on. You've done it like 3 times. Shake your head at me.
Maybe we're undead. That would explain a lot.
Well, look. I don't remember taking any like weird oaths or anything. I haven't dabbled in necromancy just yet.
Well, that's always good.
I did do a little bit of promotion earlier today on Quora, so hopefully that helps us out. And I had been talking to the people over at the fine folks over at Quora about, and I know Matt, we had this discussion once about how posts don't get the same engagement that answers do. And I mentioned that to them in the the Palantir there, and they told me, oh, that shouldn't be. We've made it so that posts should be on parity with answers, and you should get the same, views, give or take. And I said, well, admittedly, it has been a while since I've tried to make a post, because every time I make a post, it gets like 20 views, or if I answer a question, it's tens of thousands. I just gave up on that. So maybe you did change it, and I just don't know. So anyway, I mentioned that, and I tried a post last month, and the result was pretty much the same as it's always been, and I let them know about that, and they said they're looking into it. So improvements are happening.
Very cool.
One way to solve that is if we start writing questions for each other, like, hey, John, tell me more about Tolkien live stream.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, Sid, what's your topic for next month? And I'll tell you, I won't tell you.
Yeah. I mean, Matt had done something similar to that last time. It was sort of piggybacked on an existing answer, but I think it worked really well.
I did another one 5 days ago.
So maybe that. Well, okay. So and you mentioned and you linked to the podcast and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I did, and I sent it to you guys by text to see if you liked it.
Did I get that text? Hold on. Let me see. Was that in the group text, or did you send it individually?
I think I sent it. I think it was to either you or both of you. I don't remember, and that's fine. But I was just letting you know, hey, just that I sent this out. It was a short article, but it was kind of cool because let me try to find it. I haven't looked at how many.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I see it here. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, that was sent on the 26th. So, yeah.
What was the topic again?
What are some recommended Tolkien podcasts that could be found online?
Yeah.
I didn't answer that because I had a heck of a November, let me tell you. We'd lost power for a few days here and had to go to a hotel, and then we had to deal with this whole situation of having to throw out all the food in the refrigerator and the freezer, which is really rough a few days before Thanksgiving, which is when that was. So I had made this barbecued pork that was going to be baked into buns, and that was going to be one of the Thanksgiving meals, but it had to be thrown out. So that wasn't great. It was I felt like Sam having to throw his pots and his pans away in Mordor, Not great.
Not great.
Yeah. You know, Sam is fascinating because it's like, you know, everybody's, you know, trying to travel light, and this guy's lugging cast iron skillets through Mordor, and he won't give them up until the very end.
Well, I think it's so endearing that he's trying to bring the Shire in with him everywhere he goes. I mean, it's not, to me, it doesn't seem like it's about the cooking necessarily, although it's part of it. I just think that the comforts of home are so important to the hobbits for where they're going, and I think it's kind of cool.
See, I think that like Sam doesn't understand the whole like survivalist mentality like that Aragorn would understand, or that Faramir would understand. He has a box of salt because he's just like, well, what's the point of not seasoning your food, you know?
Yeah. Hey, by the way, there was like...
Well, hold on. Only one person at a time. It gets jumbled.
I would say as hobbits go, he has an excellent sense of what it takes to survive. But actually, what's really important is Sauron is so lucky he never met Sam face to face. I think with a cast iron pan in hand, Sam would win.
Well, that's what they sort of did that in the film, where he instead of the orcs all slaying each other in Cirith Ungol, Sam went through there with his panjutsu, you know. It was very amusing. Yeah, it's interesting though, the uses of humor in the films, and then some people are like, well, that was probably not in the book, and that's some of it. Yeah, no, I like no, that's in the book. You know, not the pan thing, but one of the things that, you know, for people who haven't read The Lord of the Rings, that they're surprised was not added for the film is, you know, potatoes. You know, that part that's in the book. The part mash 'em, boil 'em, stick 'em in a stew was an invention of the films. He said something different, but hey, W2, how's it going? Somebody in the chat just said, hey, sorry I'm late. I haven't had my Tolkien fix in at least 50 minutes.
Well, there were some really good Jackson sub creation.
Yeah.
Actor sub creation, ad lib, that kind of filled in some of the relationship things that Tolkien didn't go into himself. So in those...
And we're going to be talking about a lot of that today.
Yeah. I thought a lot of that was actually, you know, really good. By the way,
go
the
ahead.
article that I wrote on the podcast was...
I saw it. I just
read with 2,500 people.
Hey, that's good. That's good. One moment that I think could have been in the film, but wouldn't have worked because they had dropped the subplot about Frodo selling Bag End to Lobelia, is that when they're leaving and Frodo and Pippin are at the door, and they call out, Sam, it's time to go. And he just sort of like comes out of the depths of Bag End, and it mentions that he had been saying goodbye, this is Tolkien's exact words, saying goodbye to the beer casks. And he was sort of coming out and wiping his mouth. And I always imagined that, like in a film, that you could see Sam and Pippin and Frodo and Pippin and Frodo calling out, Sam, it's time to go. And then cutting to Sam with his head under the tap, pouring it directly in there, and then just kind of bumping his head as, you know, I think that could be a very funny moment that is Tolkien, you know, ish. But, yeah, you know, because they had dropped the subplot about him selling the house, it might not have worked.
Anyway, I would do it with the very last drop coming out of the...
Yes! He's going to make sure there's no beer left. But, you know, it's funny because Lobelia's son... when he sort of becomes the big tough boss of the Shire in Book 6, one of the things that he does is he bans beer because he doesn't like it, and so he figures he doesn't like it, nobody else should be able to have it. And I wonder, that could be sour grapes for Sam drinking it all.
Sounds a lot like Prohibition to me.
Prohibition did lead to organized crime in real life, and you know, you had this sort of like Hobbit mafia led by I always mix up whether Otho or Lotho is the son. And I'm not going to look it up right now, but
It's Lotho.
Lotho's the son. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
There's certain names that I screw up a little bit, and one of them is there's 3 elves that I always conflate with each other. I know who each of them are, but then I always have to look up the name because it's Ondifer, Orifer, and Orodreth. And I'm like, okay, which one was Thranduil's father? Which one was Gil-galad's father? It's I have to look it up every time.
Yeah.
Just seeing the time, we are at our moment of starting our 2 minutes fast.
It's how it goes. But anyway, yeah, okay, so we're going to go in a certain order today. It is going to be me, and then, what did I say? I said me, and then Sid, and then Matt. Was that what I said?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have anything that we want to discuss before we get down to the nitty-gritty of the actual topics and everything, or are we good to go?
Well, we talked about at least covering 1 or 2 artists that we feel people should know about.
That's right. Okay, so originally I was going to my topic was going to be about artistic depictions of Tolkien characters or places, and this is something that always fascinated me as a kid because my parents had this, well, really my mother had this great collection of the old calendars, the Tolkien calendars that would be released every year, and they kept all of them. And I would look through all this artwork and all these, very different depictions, and a lot of them are by the Hildebrandt brothers, but there were others in there. And I always thought it was amazing how different people would, for example, view orcs differently than others. And I've always liked looking at artistic depictions of Tolkien, and especially as a young boy when I was around 12 years old, and I had just read The Lord of the Rings, and I had not read the Silmarillion yet. There was a lot of the art in there was of stuff that I didn't know about, like they would have like Yarandil or something, and I was like, well, I know that's Elrond's dad, but I don't know much about him other than Bilbo's poem, But anyway, I was going to say let's have a discussion where we each sort of bring forth 3 or 4 artists and just that we like. But then I realized it as a topic for the actual like half-hour segment, it isn't going to work as well because I would have to do a lot of editing maybe to show art on the screen, and then whose webcam is getting covered up, and it's a whole thing. So I thought, instead, as Matt mentioned, just in the intro here, we could just name like maybe 1 or 2 artists that we appreciate that people could look up on Google, or actually I could just put links to their pages in the description when this goes up on YouTube. Matt, why don't you real quick go, like I said, just give me like 1 or 2 artists that you would recommend to people.
Okay, well, I'm going to focus on the ladies on my little list here. My number 1 artist that I just love so much is Elena Kukunova.
She's fantastic. Yeah.
Fantastic. She's going to be one of the ones I actually find original artwork at some point and frame and put in my own house. But if you can find Elena Kukunova, it's spelled Ku.
I'm going to put the link in the description. Don't worry.
Okay.
Hey, Laurel. Laurel's in the chat.
Laurel, please go find her work. It's absolutely beautiful. Even her artwork, what Sauron looks like, the time he's making the rings, and the time he's at Numenor are so haunting and so beautiful, gorgeous of a being that Sauron is at the same time. It really captures the depth of what Tolkien describes Sauron to be, and just to be able to capture that's amazing to me.
And just to wait, let me just hold on 1 second. Let me just point out that for anybody watching live, WT just put a link to Elena Kukunova's website in the chat, and like I said, if you're watching on YouTube, it will be in the description as well. All right, go ahead. Give me 1 more, Matt.
The other one is Inger Edelfelt.
Oh, I've seen her work. Yeah.
She used a lot of watercolor, but she's got some just beautiful renditions of things. I would also just say if you go to DeviantArt or look up Tolkien artists on DeviantArt or something like that, you'll come into some that you can find on your own that'll be
place to look. Sid, do you have anybody that you would want to just like give me one or two if you have any?
The two people I can name everyone knows, but I want to give you a little detail of where to learn more about them. I haven't gone, I've flicked through things but never noted artists, but I've looked deeply at both Alan Lee and John Howe. And if you want some fun, go into Peter Jackson's extended edition and pick up his notes on the producing and how he got the two of them on board. He actually sent a FedEx to Alan Lee and tracked it in the days before we had global tracking, and watched it come to his door, was waiting for the phone to ring. And but also how they each took on not just doing art, but designing the concepts for every set, and how then those got implemented by the Weta workshop. It's really an amazing story of producing art to the movie scale, and a lot to learn from it for those who are interested in how to do art or how to do movies.
Good. Yeah, and as far as anyone could possibly be considered like the official Tolkien artist, years ago that would have been the Hildebrand brothers, but I think today it's Alan Lee, because almost every, any kind of illustrated edition that you get is either going to have art from Tolkien himself, or it's going to be Alan Lee. Usually the book covers are Alan Lee, like just like the Children of Húrin, the image of Turin Turambar on the cliff, or Luthien riding Huan with Beren walking beside her. Those are just fantastic images. Like Matt, I would focus on the ladies here a little bit. My absolute favorite Tolkien artist is Jenny Dolphin, and she does have sort of a painterly, almost watercolorish style to her work. When I wrote my paper of Turin as coming to Valinor, which is like the closest thing that I've done to a Tolkien thesis, I heavily used her art because her image of what Tour of Gondolin looked like is the image that I have in my head. Like, I can't imagine. Nobody else depicts Tour or the fall of Gondolin correctly, in my opinion. I think she's number one Tolkien artist for real. The other one that I would mention would be, a little bit of a lesser known name, but her art is out there. Her name is Eula Alexieva, and she is one of the few people that pays enough attention to detail and lore. For example, she draws Aragorn the way that he's described in the book. She doesn't try to make him look like Viggo Mortensen. She doesn't draw him with a beard, but she still, captures the character in a really great way. So those are the two that I would go to. Okay, so I think... go ahead, sorry.
I think Eula... I'm sorry, I was going to just say the Eula Alexieva one was going to be the other one I was going to mention.
Look at that. See? Right. I don't know what it is that when... Well, when it comes to drawing characters like this, I don't know. Like, I think that women draw them better. Even
I want to add something to that. I agree with you to a certain degree. I think for some reason women draw characters better.
Yeah.
And the men seem to be drawing the scenes.
Yes, absolutely. Because like the ones that Sid mentioned, your Ted Nasmiths and your Ted Nasmith's fantastic. I mean, he's a go-to for sure. And your Alan Lees, their characters are fine. There's nothing wrong with them. But what they really excel at is the landscapes. Like, no one draws Mordor like Ted Nasmith draws Mordor. You know what I mean? When they draw mountains and Rivendell and all that.
It's so interesting that the left brain architectural art side is done better by the men, and the artistic, humanistic aspects are done better by the ladies. I just think it's a cool point.
There might be some commentary there, but I don't know what it is. But we're gonna come over here. Sid, go ahead. I think that's true, but I suspect it's probably cultural. And the other thing I would say is that when Jackson split it up, Alan Lee got everything except the bad guys and the sets for the bad guys.
Okay.
And, John Howe did the bad guy art, and it actually creates a dark and light that one artist couldn't
Yeah.
have done. It was a brilliant choice.
Because that was
I agree with that.
that was his Balrog, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go first, and I'm going to set myself here 2 minutes to explain what we're talking about. And it does have to do actually with the film, so we're going to start that right now. So I got a question on Quora that I wrote an article in response to, and I thought this would make a really fun and engaging and thought-provoking conversation for us. But of course, I'm going to expand it beyond just the simple question that we got, which was, what character in the Peter Jackson film trilogy was the closest in terms of being exactly like the way that Tolkien described them, not so much in looks, but in personality and affectation and everything. Who was the person that was spot on? And I have an answer, of course, and I'll get into that when we get into the actual segment. But I also thought it would be fun to sort of ask each of us 3 questions. Who did they get exactly right? Who did they screw up the most? And who did they improve the most? Because there are aspects of the films that I would say are improvements, and of course there are aspects of the films that I say belong in the trash. Okay, well, I didn't even use up the whole 2 minutes, but there we have it. So actually, I have my answers here, but I'm going to set the 30-minute timer, and I'm actually going to go to Sid. Let's start with spot on. Who do you think in the films was absolutely spot on?
I can think of 2, and I think one is someone everyone would just come to mind, which is Galadriel.
Interesting.
It was
Okay.
just excellent image, excellent performance, excellent sense of inner stature. But the one they pegged absolutely perfectly, without a doubt, was Shadowfax.
Wait, they didn't even get him. He wasn't even the right color.
But there's one story in it which, in the film where, again at the end of Fangorn, where Gandalf whistles and Shadowfax.
Oh, beautiful shot. Beautiful.
He pegged it. The horse pegged it in 1.
The horse was the best actor. Coming in from the chat, somebody, you got to take your finger off the button. Somebody mentions Wormtongue, and I didn't even think of Wormtongue when I answered this, but that was a very good depiction of Wormtongue. I agree with you about Galadriel, but I got to say that you're incorrect in one way, Sid. That's not the thing that came to mind. What came to mind for me immediately was Sam. I think that Sam was absolutely perfect in the films, and I think that the only thing that I would say, my only note would be he was a little meaner to Gollum in the films than he was in the movie or in the book. But I think that when you look at the deviations between Sam on the page and Sam on the silver screen, he's never out of character. As Frodo's out of character, or Faramir's out of character, and it sort of throws him off a little bit. But I felt like Sam was pretty spot on. Matt, your thought for like spot on character from the films?
Oh gosh.
And by the way, just while you're thinking, I'll give you a little buffer here. Most of the other answers, aside from myself, are saying Gandalf, and he's sort of like on my radar here, but I felt he was made of sterner stuff in the novel.
I guess I'm gonna say 2 real quick. I thought the rendition of the Balrog was just great. And I want to say also that I agree with what Sid said about Galadriel for sure, absolutely amazing, and Sam as well. But Gandalf for sure, but I want to also say it's my time anyway to say that.
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
Gandalf was done absolutely brilliantly by the actor who played Ian McKellen. He was done wrong in one way for me that I did not like, and whenever I see the movie I just go, I mean, really? What I didn't like was the underusage of Glamdring, and the fact that when Gandalf was in his mode of operation on people or doing whatever, didn't show his sword glowing.
Well,
And
that's
I didn't like. I'm just saying what
yeah.
I know.
That's on the special
And
effect. I mean, I know you were involved in that too, and you wanted the sword to glow in that film.
well, because they were in proximity
Yeah.
through orcs, and
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
a sword goes through it, when a sword goes through an orc, last I checked, that's proximity.
Oh yeah.
But so I just didn't like that part of it because they made a point of these things. We knew that it glowed for him in the Hobbit, and then they
But
forgot to
that's
do it.
I
Completely
just
forgot
want to
to do
say
it.
though that's not the character. That's an object. That's
I know, and that's why I'm making a
yeah.
distinction. The
Yeah.
character was portrayed correctly by the actor and not portrayed correctly by the director.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Laurel, by the way, is saying Samwise as well. Now here's
Let me
another.
let me finish.
Oh,
I
okay.
have
I'm
one
sorry. Go
final
ahead.
point. Oh, yeah, real quick. The fact that he didn't have any what you might call semi translucent or glowing aura about him, or even the fact that there wasn't any light of the Ainur in his eye, like one of those really small little type glints that you can see in someone's eyes. They do other films. The fact that that wasn't there for him also kind of didn't feel accurate that they left that out for me. So those are two of my answers there.
Go ahead, Sid.
I would just say, especially for Gandalf the White, I was just reading passages, and the aura of light in the very depths of darkness, as it appears that the Witch King is winning the Battle of Minas Tirith, and Gandalf rides in to save Faramir. The light is absolutely described in the book.
They
You got some of it at Helm's Deep, and it was done well.
Yeah, they did it at Helm's Deep, and they also did it at Edoras when he cast off the gray cloak, and and then Theoden was sort of like, that was pretty great. I had this conversation with you on the phone once, Matt, about not only Glamdring, but see, I think you said especially Gandalf the White. It makes sense for him to have that sort of commanding and angelic presence. Gandalf the Grey maybe should be more down to earth and sort of cloaked and just appears to be an old man, except when he faces the Balrog. I would have loved to have seen his eyes light up when he faced the Balrog. That should have, But we agreed, we talked about this, that the scene of Gandalf and the Balrog, as majestic as it was, it could have been even better of a depiction.
Yeah.
With those little details like the sword and his eyes and whatnot. Now here's the next.
So I come down on right and wrong on one single character for two different reasons, and I'll just reserve my comments on a character for improvement.
Well, yeah. So your most perfect then is somehow I missed what you said there. what did you say that was the most? Because Sid said Galadriel and I said Sam, and then you talked about Gandalf, but you said something before that.
I thought the Balrog was done.
The Balrog. See, no, the Balrog. I mean, I could talk about that all day, but it's not really a character. It's more of a presence, Like there's not a lot of acting, especially somebody who's CGI, and I mean, you can make it look like whatever at that point,
Well,
At least
he's still a name.
At least
He's still a named being.
At least Shadowfax was played by a real horse who nailed it in one scene. I didn't know that, Sid.
Well, the name he's a named being who appears, in the Lord of the Rings, but he's a leftover from the same Balrogs described in the Silmarillion.
Mm-hmm.
So he is a legitimate old school character.
No, but what I mean is that it's not a character that has any dialogue or anything like that. I mean, pretty much with the Balrog.
I've answered questions about that before. Yeah. Like, what's my favorite quote in the book, and I've included the Balrog's snort.
I love when we answer like that,
because it harkens back to this. It harkens back to the difference of opinion about who to follow before Ainur even came into Arda. I mean, these are ancient opponents who sided with Morgoth and with
from the
Melkor
from
and
the start,
Aragorn
yeah.
from the beginning.
Coming in from the
And
chat, by the way, somebody said that their main takeaway from this is going to be that Shadowfax's horse actor nailed it in one go.
Pretty easy to do if you can find a white horse.
Well, no, not so much, because with the horse could get distracted or could start running in circles or something.
Here, from his entrance in the distance through the entire run,
That's one shot.
In front of Gandalf the White, one shot, first take, done perfectly.
Yeah, wonderful for an animal. I hadn't even thought of Shadowfax. That's so interesting. At first I thought, well, they didn't even get his color right because he's supposed to be gray. And I understand a white horse is very striking for film and everything, but yeah, you're right. That was pretty cool. I think that a lot of people think that Tolkien scholars are these sort of stodgy people who we take ourselves really very seriously and we don't joke around and everything. It's so not true. We constantly joke. We have our own memes. We love this sort of stuff because it's fun, like Matt mentioning that, what's your favorite quote from the film? And it's the Balrog going, it's just, that's the kind of answer I would give. Like somebody asked, what fictional world would I want to live in? And I would say, I would love to visit Middle Earth from the holodeck on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
You can't smoke that on Twitch, by the way. Just so you know, I know you were doing that for a prop, but I have to say that for legal reasons. Okay, so who did they get the most wrong? What is the character that is they dropped the ball on the absolute most? We're gonna go in the same order. Sid, yeah, we're gonna go with you first because we're gonna go in the same order here.
Well, since we were just talking about special effects, I'm going to name one in that category. Then I'll go on to some others. Okay. There's an important note about the special effects. Anything in the film of the Two Towers, what happened was Jackson was called to win all those Academy Awards for the Fellowship while the Two Towers was in post-production. Mm. And their time was incredibly challenged, and they missed some things. And the special effect that absolutely failed was Eowyn cuts off the head of the Nazgul's flying beast. The neck is flopping around, and there's no blood.
That's the Return of the King.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was I can't believe they blew that one.
Well, I mean, I think that's a choice they made. Take your finger off.
Sorry, I disagree. It was.
Well, let me finish what I was saying. Because in the Fellowship of the Ring, when Lurtz the orc, the Uruk-hai, when Aragorn decapitates him, there's no blood, and I think they were trying to preserve the rating there. If anything, there's not a lot of blood in the Lord of the Rings, in the film versions at least.
You might be right. Spurting blood may be a ratings issue. I take it back.
Yeah.
As for characters, they really didn't do well in the movie. There's Tom Bombadil.
They didn't do him at all.
Glorfindel, and people think they did Prince Imrahil, but they didn't. So I'm gonna stand up for the excised characters.
That's a take. It's not what I was expecting, but that is a take. The characters that didn't make it into it, and I gotta say, out of those, the ones that I do miss the most is Imrahil, because he speaks to a history of Gondor that could have been delved into. And coming in from the chat is somebody that I 100%, this is my pick. I actually have two picks. One of them is a really cold take. Everyone agrees, and the other one might be more spicy. The one that everyone agrees on is, boy, did they screw up Faramir. Boy, did they just ruin him completely. They dragged him through the mud. It was character assassination. They got him wrong in every way that you could get Faramir wrong. It's rough watching him on screen because he was such a great character, and one of the characters that J.R.R. Tolkien himself the most identified with. So it's difficult to see them fumble Faramir. But the other character that I want to mention, that, like I said, this might be a little spicy for people, is I think they screwed up Frodo. And I think they screwed up Frodo pretty badly. And I think it can be a real shock and a surprise to people who are coming from the film to reading the book to find out that Frodo stands up for himself. Frodo can speak his own mind. Frodo is brave. And he's not basically this football to be carried around. He isn't so helpless against the Nazgul at the ford of Bruinen. He stands his ground. He raises his sword. He invokes the name of Elbereth. There's just so many scenes of Frodo being brave and being also as well Mr. Baggins, Master of Bag End. I understand that, the choice of casting such a young actor. I think Elijah Wood was only 17 when they cast him. But nothing against Elijah Wood, but he seemed more like a kid in the movies. Go ahead, Sid.
I don't think it was Elijah Wood.
It wasn't him.
It wasn't him. No, I think it was a failure of the relationship between Peter Jackson as director and Elijah Wood as actor. It's a very hard thing to cast. If you read the book closely, 90% of Frodo is an inner turmoil simply because the ring is constantly trying to defeat him. And that occurs steadily every single day, every hour for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an incredibly hard thing to depict, but I think that Peter Jackson's direction of what facial expressions Frodo should use was not well done. No complaints. I'm not saying anyone could have done it really well, but I wanted to take it away from the actor because I didn't feel that the actor failed out there.
I agree. I think also that the depiction of Frodo gets better when he's more removed from the Fellowship, the Return of the King. They did a great job with him there. It's rough in Fellowship when he comes off as really like the whiny sort of character that he is in the film. Matt, who do you think they screwed up?
Well, I'm gonna go start with the one that I think is screwed up the least of the two I think of, and that's Denethor. I thought it was overdone, or overcooked eggs on him. I didn't like the way that they rendered it. I mean, I understand that they were kind of close, but I didn't think it was that great. But the one that they really messed up on, that I don't know. I wouldn't say it makes me angry, but what a massive lost opportunity I think was how they rendered Sauron. I would have never gone with the flaming eye on the top of Mount Barad-dûr mode. I would have had him in a semi-soot form like they showed him in The Hobbit, in a throne room at the top of Barad-dûr. And I would have had at least a scene where some of his minions or his Nazgul are coming in to talk to him, like they did with in The Hobbit, where they show, him actually being able to speak in black speech. And I think that low, deep reverb type of sound was the right thing that they were able to capture in The Hobbit. I think they could have done that a whole lot different and a whole lot better for him in the rest of that whole movie. However, I do agree that they got him right in the opening scene. I think he is that tall. I think that battle that skirmish, there's more evidence. I think that skirmish the fight that they showed in the very beginning of the movie was more accurate than not, and based on more canon than not, for what we have. And I thought that was done properly. And some people say, well, how do you know he would have had armor? Well, we know that Morgoth feared death. We know that he wore armor from the Silmarillion. So if he fears death and wore armor, I think the assumption that if Sauron's going to enter a battle, which we know he did, and he knows he's going to enter a battle against the kind of elves that he entered that battle against, which were pretty heavy, big hitters, he would have been armored, and he would have used more probably a mace. I suppose the way that those characters were struck, or at least the way that the passages indicate that those elves were struck and Elendil were struck. And so it just seems more plausible that that's what Sauron was copying from his master
Okay.
Morgoth in the Silmarillion. So I thought that was actually really really well done.
Okay.
But I just
Well,
didn't
hold
like
up.
the way that the
You
audience rendered.
Okay, so I agree and disagree at the same time about Sauron. I agree that we needed more of him, and the eyeball thing, I think, served more to confuse people than anything, because there were a lot of people that thought that eyeball was Sauron, and I'm like, no, he's.
Yeah.
And I know that they filmed a scene where he appears at the Black Gate, and you even see his true form and everything, but they didn't use it. You could see it on YouTube. It's sort of unfinished special effects, but. What I don't agree with is I didn't like the depiction in the beginning because it was too much like Morgoth. And I mean, he even had an iron crown, and I think that, like, yeah, I just don't know. Like, he has his own identity. He doesn't need to be Morgoth Jr. I would have loved to have seen him just using his flaming hands to swat everybody away instead of using a hammer or a mace like Morgoth would, because he's a different sort of character. He's very different from Morgoth in a lot of ways. But no, I agree. I would have liked to have seen some, as you put it, throne room scenes with him. Maybe not like a soot form. I would have liked to have seen him sort of like just almost blackened, like and covered in scars. I would have liked to have seen something that, like, you can imagine that he's been through something like the Akalabeth. Sid, go ahead. We're not hearing you. We're not hearing you. Nope. You might have to, Sid, try to drop off the call and come back maybe, because it's not working. We'll see if we could fix this.
I'll yield my time to him as soon as he comes back on.
We have plenty of time.
I would just say that I agree with what you're saying. There should have been a heated, hot, glowing hand part of this.
Yeah.
But I understand why they did in the beginning, because the opening scene is so graphic.
It would be very graphic, yeah.
Every mother with a 10-year-old would have walked out of that theater in the first minute or two.
I mean, there's ways to depict horrible things without making it too. Okay, there goes Sid. Hopefully, when he comes back, we'll be able to hear him. I just wrote a thing just today about this scene and how I feel that they, the reasons why they made the choice. I mean, because somebody else, like he's smashing everybody with this mace, and then suddenly he reaches for Isildur, like, why are you doing that? You have a weapon, And I explain, well, okay, it's not the greatest way of doing it, but they have to show the ring on his finger, and because for whatever reason they wanted Isildur to actually fight him and to basically win by blind luck, and they have to show the ring and shot like that. So I get it,
Well, the reach out for Isildur in the movie is not the way it was described in the book.
Well, he didn't reach for him at all. He was dead on the ground.
That's right. And so they invented
but
the last half of that little battle there to make it work.
But they had to, because a lot of the more Sid, we need to have your webcam up. The more detailed depiction. Okay, we have Sid. Was from books that are not the Lord of the Rings. All right, try and say something, Sid.
Hi there. Am I good now?
You're good. You're good.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and say what you were going to.
Yeah. There's an amazing piece of original Tolkien art of Sauron at Barad-dûr that gives a completely different image of both Sauron and also Barad-dûr itself, because the upper part of Barad-dûr is simply a large building built of pieces of large rocks, of large stones. And Sauron is sitting in the third floor corner window with one red eye.
Yeah.
It's totally different than anything that anyone's ever depicted elsewhere.
And he also had that drawing, it was sort of unfinished, of Sauron's hand reaching towards the Black Gate as well, that showed a little bit of what he would have imagined Sauron to look like. But unfortunately, he never finished the drawing.
Well, they could have achieved all this. Sorry, Sid, go ahead.
You go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I'm interrupting you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that there is the way that Sauron appeared in Frodo's mind when Frodo was bearing the ring, um, and was gaining more transparency and vision, as Galadriel acknowledges. Due to the effect of the ring, I think the image of Sauron's flaming eye does match words in the book. It's
Absolutely.
just that's how he looked in the Land of Shadow, but it's not, or through the Palantir, but it's not how he looked in the day to day. Oh, the way Gollum saw him. Actually, a great scene would have been Gollum being tortured by a guy with 9 fingers.
Yeah.
That's in
Oh yeah,
that's
absolutely.
it
They
could
they
have been
they
done.
alluded to it because in Fellowship you hear Gollum screaming in pain and going, "Sire, Baggins!" The thing about torture on screen is it's so much more effective when you don't actually show it. And when you see Gollum in good lighting, you see he's covered in scars. But go ahead, Matt. We have to move on, though,
Sorry,
but quickly.
let me interject and just say that Sid's right. But let me clarify my problem with it. Wasn't that there wasn't the Eye of Sauron involved? It was the rendering of it. When you have the ring on, they could have easily shown that there was some kind of a mind invasion or a mind vision of Sauron's making connection with your Fea in your mind.
I think they tried.
They could have rendered it that way in his mind. Yeah. Have to show it on top of Eridur. They could have, like I said, done a more of a soot form. But hold on, I want to say one other thing.
But we gotta
right,
move on.
He was, I know, but hold on. He was 60 years after the Hobbit soot form thing. He would have been probably more, I would say, solidified, more constituted, and he could have had more of a humanoid form.
Well,
and so I agree with you on that, John.
You agree with me on that? I didn't say anything like that. First of all,
he should have been rendered. Yeah, you said he should be rendered. He should have been. It would have been cool if he would.
Okay, wait. Well, hold on.
As more of a bodily form.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time here, and we're getting so far off topic. First off, the Hobbit films weren't made yet, so we can't think of that. That soot form was ridiculous. He had a body at that point. He was the necromancer. That was silly. But we're not talking about. I mean, we could have this discussion about the Hobbit one day. But I'm going to add a little time here because we had it was technical issues. So the last part of this is who did they improve on? Who's a character that you felt was actually the depiction was so good in the movie that it was better? Sid, do you have anybody that you would say fits that?
I have one. It's been talked about a lot. It's very controversial. But I'm going to place, and I'm not. I agree with many of the negative things other people say, but I'm going to point out 2 reasons why giving Arwen Glorfindel's role and trying to boost her up as more of a main character was very good to do. First of all, half or more than half of Tolkien's audience today is women and young women. Mm-hmm. And adding an effective role model for that, I think it was a good reading of the change in our times from the 1930s, which is when Tolkien was actually writing The Lord of the Rings, although it didn't get published till closer to the 1950s. And
he procrastinated a bit.
Yeah. Well, there was this little thing called World War II. Let's not lay it all on Tolkien.
Well, I mean, also he was a teacher, But he is a procrastinator.
Yeah, no, but actually, in the UK, publication was extremely restricted due to lack of paper during the war. Yeah. The other piece was that I had a personal experience. I was at a very low time in my life when The Lord of the Rings came out, and I was there for the first showing in my city, and I sat through it twice. But I had a deep need for spiritual light and was in what some people would call a dark night of the soul, though I wouldn't quite call it that. It was almost as bad.
Okay.
And when Arwen rode in and came to treat Frodo in the first moment, that was the first moment of literally contact with the divine light I had in about 6 months. So
Yeah.
you'll never let me
Yeah.
you'll never make me not like it because of
Okay.
the inner experience.
I'm sorry, I have to, because we're so low on time now, and we have to let everybody speak. I was going to say Arwen anyway, so I agree with you. I actually pointed this out not long ago, that she's not merely taking Glorfindel's role. She takes on what Glorfindel does, but she also takes a little bit of Frodo and a little bit of Elrond and a little bit of Gandalf with her, because the Flood was the machination of both Elrond and Gandalf, and they made this seem like this was just Arwen, that she could just do this, and it made her very, very powerful. I do agree with Tolkien would have liked it, is where I'm getting with this, because he was struggling to make the female characters more prominent in the book, most specifically Galadriel and Arwen. He managed to do it pretty well with Éowyn, but not so much with the other two. A lot of their parts are in Unfinished Tales, or they're in the appendix. Matt, who would you say is the most improved? We have 3 minutes, by the way.
Well, I love Sid's reasoning on this. It was the right move to make, and he also brought forward Luthien forward into the storytelling, and her relationship with Baron, and I think that was also something that was achieved by the Jackson team. I actually saw an interview with this, and it was Boyens. It was Boyens who really pushed for this to take that turn, and I agree with it. The other one that I think was really heavily improved, just by the acting. I thought Elrond was done very, very well.
Oh, you're killing me.
Well, I thought he did it.
Yeah.
I think he did a good job. And I don't know. I would say
Okay.
I don't know how many of them were actually improved. I mean, some of them were
done
very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult thing. Improvement. I think we're just agreeing on Arwen. Elrond, I have issues with the acting specifically because he just scowls too much for my taste, and I didn't get that feeling of him being, as Bilbo described him, as kind and warm as summer. We talked about Gandalf a little bit, and I'm not saying that Gandalf is improved, but I want to bring up one scene that was not in the book, or rather it was adapted from the book in a rather interesting way, was when Gandalf tells Pippin what happens after you die. That is a scene that I wish was in the book, and I think Tolkien would have loved it. It was adapted from a conversation with Aragorn where he said, "I will not speak of the roads I took," but I just thought that was amazing.
Well, I agree with you, and let me say 20 seconds worth. I do think there is something that came to my mind that was greatly improved. The troll and Moria was greatly improved for theatrical purposes. Obviously, I think the troll was probably about the right size, maybe a little bit larger than he should have been, but he didn't have very much description in the book, and I thought that the way they did it in the movie was quite impactful.
I think all we got to see in the book was a foot anyway. Sid, last thoughts real quick?
True. Actually, no, we're good.
Okay. Well, we only had 10 seconds left, so so I've already forgotten again who I said we were going to go next. I think it was you, Matt. No, it was Sid. Okay, all right. I should write this down. Actually, I did write it down. I just don't have that handy there. We have a quote here from the chat before I go into that. "No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path, one that we must all take. The gray rain curtain of this world rolls back and all turns to silver glass, and then you see it." That's Gandalf's line in the movie that I thought was... It's so Tolkien that you would think that he wrote it. But, all right, Sid.
Since you raised that one, I'm going to make a comment before I dive into my topic. I disagree completely.
Okay.
That is something that does not happen to mortal men or hobbits. That is what happens to elves when they cross the sea and then up through the heavens to Aman. We don't know
Yeah.
what happens when men dies, and
Yeah.
and all those descriptions of a gray, uh, you know, fog or rainfall clearing were referring to the trip to Aman, which Frodo did make, Aragorn didn't,
But
and it's not
Gandalf didn't make that
Didn't
trip
make
either.
that trip either.
When he died, he left the
When he
world.
died, he left the world.
he was on the ship at the end. Well, Gandalf the White did when he
No,
left on the ship.
that's not what the quote is.
It's not what the quote is.
I disagree entirely. I think it was, and I think it specifically depicts going on to Aman. And it has
Okay,
nothing to do with human identity.
Okay, if you could take your finger off the button for just a moment so I don't get an echo. The scene that is being quoted in the chat was what Gandalf said to Pippin in Minas Tirith. He hadn't gone to Valinor yet, but he had died, and Pippin knew that he had died and come back, and he asked him, "What is it like?" And he told him. And it might not be the exact description that you're thinking of leaving the world. I mean, because he says the gray rain curtain of this world. And keeping in mind that they didn't exactly have the rights to the Silmarillion to get a super accurate, but the poetry of it, and he's putting his mind at ease. He's letting him know that death is not the end. That because he knows it's not the end. Nobody in Middle Earth really knows what happens after you die, but Gandalf knows because he's been there and he came back. So I think that it's just wonderful that Pippin is having this fear of death, and Gandalf is telling him not to be afraid of death, and he says that doesn't sound so bad, and Gandalf looks at him in the film and he says, no, it's not so bad at all, and with the idea of Morgoth having created the fear of death, I think that he would have loved that scene. But, okay. Let's not dwell. My topic has gone a little over time here. Let's get to Sid's topic. 2 minutes to intro your topic, Sid. Go ahead. Oh, hold on. I got to reset it because we're not hearing you. Try it again. Go ahead. Are you pressing the button? All right, we're having this issue again. Let me go ahead and stop it. You're not lighting up. I don't see the green border around you. All right. Hopefully he comes back quickly and...
Would you like me to go, or do you want to...
Well, let's give him a minute here, because he's all ready to go.
Oh, I know.
Just...
That's fine. But
for whatever reason, I don't... well, we'll just talk during it. For whatever reason, sometimes like he has that push to talk, and the reason he does that is so that when we talk, there's not that horrible reverb that comes back. But for some reason, sometimes it just stops working. And right. Oh, he's coming back. Okay. All right. We just need him to turn the webcam on. That's all.
as long as he's coming back on, I'll just say I see where both of you are coming from. He's trying to make a distinction about what actually happens to different beings who die, and you're making a distinction about what Gandalf was actually saying, and I hear both of what you're saying.
I mean, like the person in the chat who wrote that even said that, you know, it was comfort to a frightened hobbit, and that was sort of the point of it. Okay, Sid, can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay. I was just saying, I don't understand why the push to talk suddenly stops working sometimes.
I don't either, but anyway, let's...
All right, go ahead.
John,
2 minutes.
I agree with what you said. Now, first, I agree on last thing. I agree with what you said about it being a great scene, and that the Gandalf speaking to Pippin, and Tolkien would have loved the spirit of it. My problem is that the language of it was used throughout the book in Frodo's dreams and other places to describe the journey to Aman, which mortals don't take.
Well, anyway, absolutely, that's true. I just
I don't think
Peter Jackson knew that at the time. Okay, go ahead.
Anyway,
2 minutes.
My topic is Faramir. I spent the day rereading every Faramir passage in The Lord of the Rings. I'm willing to go with a little bit from the letters and background in the Silmarillion. My thesis is that Faramir is a linchpin or a cardinal point we can use to understand what Tolkien was trying to say to explain the history of humanity in the first age, the second age, the third age, the beginning of the fourth age, and today. And that it also describes, it brings forth like a hologram, the family of Denethor, Boromir, and Faramir brings on a an understanding of what it was like to be in Gondor, where the presence and power of the um, the faithful barely remains among the royals, even less among the lords, and most of the people are stout men of Gondor, but not
Okay.
touched
Okay.
by elven
Hold on.
magic and the might.
Okay. We're getting past intro where you're actually starting, so let me just stop there and set the timer then. Okay, we have 30 minutes. Sid, go ahead then.
Oh, I was done. That was my intro.
Okay.
So,
I love the word that you use, linchpin,
Here's the linchpin.
because I use that same word to describe Tor, because everything that came before Tor flowed into him, and everything that came after flowed from him. And I agree with you about Faramir as well, because a lot of people say, is Bombadil Tolkien, or is Bilbo Tolkien, or is Faramir Tolkien? And the real answer is that none of these characters are Tolkien. He didn't write himself into it, but he did have characters speak his words. And when it came to Tolkien's feelings of the idea of war, he certainly used Faramir as a mouthpiece there.
I'll add one point to that. We talked earlier about poor depictions and mentioned Faramir.
Mm-hmm.
Physically, there's a description where at Ithilien, Frodo is looking at Faramir and says, he looks almost identical to his brother. So wouldn't it have been cool if they cast Sean Bean in both roles? And Sean Bean could have one role in the movies where he didn't die?
That would have been cool. I mean, yeah, physically. What's interesting is that it's something that Frodo didn't see right away, and I think it's indicative of how hobbits look at the big people. And I think that they don't exactly look at our faces too closely until they get to know us, and we see it with Aragorn, and we see it with Faramir especially, that he didn't think, hey, this guy looks exactly like Boromir, until a little bit, and he got to know him, and he's like, you're his brother, aren't you?
Yeah. Since you mentioned Aragorn, there's also a phenomenal parallel. If you reread Aragorn at Bree being a threatening figure who turns out to be an ally, and Faramir at Ithilien, who's a threatening figure who turns out to be an ally, and the way Sam jumps in to defend his master, it's a complete parallel story of mistrust, Sam's defense, then recognition and acceptance.
And it's so interesting. I'll get to you, Matt, in a second, because I'm sure you have stuff to say here as well. Is that the one character that you don't see that distrust between Sam and that character is Boromir. Sam and Boromir get along really well, and it's funny. Well, actually, I think that it's interesting because Faramir in the book is so good and so noble and everything, and Sam slips up and mentions the ring because he was babbling. And I love that line where he says, now look, you said if you saw the ring on the side of the road, you wouldn't pick it up. Now here's your chance to test your quality. And, it was really, really interesting the way that Sam assumed that as soon as the ring came into play that he was going to act like Boromir did. But thankfully he did not. But I go ahead, Matt. Matt, I'm sure you have stuff to say here. Let's get to you.
Well, this is a really interesting topic. I actually, I have a mostly similar view, but I have one distinction, and that is, I wonder how much a connection that Tolkien was writing into these characters as dualistic. Frodo and Sam as brothers who are not related, and Boromir and Faramir who are related, and the cross identification is interesting to me because psychologically personality type, you know, uh, psychology related studies will indicate, there's this thing about opposites attract, and there's something in Boromir that is appealing to Sam, and there's something appealing to Frodo about Faramir.
I think it's
In other
because
words,
I just want to agree with you. I think it's because Boromir speaks so plainly, and he's sort of blunt, and just says it like he feels it is, not like it is, but like the way he feels. He speaks his mind, and I think Sam kind of respects that.
yeah,
I agree,
and
but I think there's a deeper piece as well. Both Sam and Boromir are staunch, easily angered defenders
Mm-hmm.
of the ones they love. And Sam standing up to Faramir and even Aragorn is like Boromir standing up and dying for Merry and Pippin. That heroic human, not elvish sacrifice, I will give my life for this, is something that Sam and Boromir have in common, and something that Frodo and Faramir have in common is being disciples of Gandalf. And Faramir sees the light of being an elf friend in Frodo's eyes, even though he doesn't know what an elf. He's never seen an elf friend before, as far as he knows, and probably never
that's
has. And
that's
but as a disciple of Gandalf, he is attuned to this higher level. And then the really central part of that, and it's spoken about by two of Faramir's warriors in Ithilien, one of whom is Mablung, I forget the name of the other, that they simply can't believe, well, Gondor in general can't believe that Faramir is a great fighter simply because he's such a great scholar. But those who are close to him consider Faramir to be the light and salvation of Gondor, and that he is one foreordained to survive. And that's a very special level and role that you get for Éomer and Aragorn and Faramir, but not quite so much since he does nearly die. And it raises two issues. What is the character quality that Faramir has that Boromir doesn't have that makes them
The willingness to listen and understand other people's points of views.
Yeah, and actually, Faramir says it of his brother. He says his brother was. No, I guess I'm sorry.
Gandalf
It's a
said it.
comment. No, Frodo said it as a comment on the difference between the two. That Boromir was more invested in himself, and it's one of the few times that this utter humility and lack of self-centered ego comes up as a crucial quality of the faithful and of salvation. I'll pass it on to you guys.
A thought and also a question. There is, in my opinion at least, is sort of a theme that runs throughout the Return of the King specifically, and even just in the title, The Return of the King, the return of an older way that had fallen by the wayside. And you talked about like the faithful, the culture of Numenor basically returning in full force before the fall. But we see it beyond just Gondor and everything. We see it with Gandalf. Gandalf has a line where he says, "I am Saruman as he should have been," and I think that we see this sort of idea of Aragorn being Elendil as he should have been. And I think Faramir, Gandalf has a comment about Faramir that he's so much more like his father than Boromir is. That Denethor was a great warrior. Of course, as steward, he wasn't actually allowed to ride out to battle, but he was also a great scholar. And Faramir is just like him. The rift between them is more because he follows Gandalf. But Faramir, and this is, I would ask if you agree with this, the both of you, he is Denethor as he should have been. He is what the steward should be.
say three things about this. One, there's another element. Denethor never finished grieving the death of his wife, who was of partially elvish descent from the same house as, I'm going
Imrahil,
to
yeah.
forget his name,
Imrahil.
Imrahil. Yeah. And the loss of that elvish quality, he never got over it, and then he was ensnared by Sauron. And that ongoing grief is, I think, why he can't bear Faramir's presence even more than the competition, as it were, with Gandalf. He has to deny his own elvish side because of his grief, and Sauron takes advantage of that through the Palantir. The other thing this brings up is a very important question. Gandalf does some of his most important and obvious magic, and the letters describe it in length, and he describes it as angelic, like St. Peter, like the angel who saved St. Peter when St. Peter was in prison. Gandalf, when he rides out, what makes the survival of Faramir utterly important in the all-knowing eyes of Gandalf the White, that says, the fourth age, to make the fourth age as it should be, for you catastrophe to be complete, Faramir must be one of those who survives and launches the fourth age. And I think it is because he is to be Aragorn's faithful steward. That is the destiny, and it requires Gandalf's physical salvation and the healing powers of King Elisar, Aragorn, to make it happen.
And even before that, I want to piggyback off of what you said. Gandalf, I've said this many times, he operates on faith a lot, and that works for him, because of course he's an angel. Of course he should operate off of faith. He has this little bit of a crisis of a conscience when Pippin comes to him and begs him to come and save Faramir. And Gandalf says, well, I could do that, but then there are others who would die. And we understand through Gandalf's words and actions and the way he reacts that he basically traded Theoden for Faramir. He heard the death cry of the Witch King, and he knew that Theoden had passed without even having known it, and his heart was heavy because he knows he could have gone out there and chased the Witch King down and Theoden would live, but then Faramir would be gone. But then Gondor would have no king and then no steward, and it's a whole thing. But he operates off of this little guy, Pippin. Not only is he a halfling, but he's a child, and he can't say no to him, essentially, because he time and time again falls on the wisdom of hobbits and their sort of good sense. And from Pippin's perspective, what would be the purpose of not saving Faramir? How could you let him die? And I think that, yes, he might have saved Theoden, and maybe Theoden would have lived another 4 or 5 years and then passed away peacefully in his sleep, which is not something he would have wanted. But Faramir, he had a long time to go. He was more Númenórean than his brother. He lived for a very long time. He was incredibly important. He became the Prince of Ithilien. His grandson wrote the tale of Aragorn and Arwen. And the marriage with him and Éowyn is just, it's almost like Cirion and Eorl again. It's bringing Gondor and Rohan even closer together than they ever were. So it's just incredibly important. And I think that, Pippin was equally important there as well, I think. Right up there with Gandalf and with Aragorn.
I agree, and it also brings in one other element, the sense that the ending of an age has to be a passing of the crown. The old must pass away so that the young may step into their roles. And Theoden knew that and had no problem with it. Even at Helm's Deep should it happen that way. And then certainly, he was riding his glorious death ride, which is the best death of a king of Rohan. And Faramir, Éomer then was the destined new king, and Faramir was the destined new prince, because remember, he was still the steward of Gondor, but now he was the steward of a king, which hadn't happened in ages, and he was a prince in his own right, parallel now to Prince Imrahil, uh, and marrying across lands, as Imrahil's ancestor did to create the princedom of his house.
Yeah,
And
Dol Amroth.
Rough.
Dol Amroth. And I think that all of that ties together very well, that any great war, and remember, Tolkien lived inside and through World War One and survived to it more or less the way Frodo did, with a tremendous amount of shell shock, which we now call PTSD. And so he knew that those who sacrificed had to lose something so the next generation could be strong. And then his own sons went off to World War II, and he writes about that in his letter. So it very much ties to that sense of generational destiny at the end of an age.
Okay, with time half over, I have to point out, I feel like me and Sid have sort of dominated this, and Matt, I want to hear from you on this.
Well, I don't feel like I was left out at all. I think you guys are right down the middle on this. And
But I do see you nodding and everything. I'm just saying that just in terms of giving you a chance to actually speak your mind here, we need to.
Appreciate it. I would just add. The only thing I think that comes to mind is, for lack of a better term, is this kind of non-physical empathic aspect that perfected Númenórean be, way that the faithful should were and could have made Númenor and the future, Gondor and all that. And I just think that the Frodo Faramir aspect, they have a different connection because they have a different grounding. And you guys are right on it. And the other one was Sam and Boromir, and I see that as more physical, more protective, more knightly, if you want to call it that way. And also, the opposite of empathic is, lack of a better term, apathetic or insensitive. But not because they don't care. It's just that they're past all the details. They just want to defend. They just want to help. They just want to defend. And I think that's what they see in each other. And I just think that I actually think that was captured really, really well. I know that the actors at the time did a lot of research for these conditions, for the renderings of these characters, and in a lot of scenes, it took so many months to film all this, and it could have been 4 or 5 weeks they're filming this one scene. But for that, some of these actors and some of these harmonies that happened for the filming, they really got it down. Not all the time, but they just feel like they just did a really good job capturing a lot of that. And I think that's what's going on there. There's those two little connections going on between the two.
I just want to add, Fran Walsh and the writing team were utterly central to that. And her understanding of The Lord of the Rings and its depth, absolutely masterful.
One aspect of Faramir that hasn't come up that I think is interesting is he obviously, upon his father's death, became the ruling steward, sort of in absentia, because he was in a coma for a while. He had to be healed by Aragorn, and even then he was too sick to ride out to the Black Gate, and he had to spend this time with others who were very affected. Merry, Éowyn, in this hospital. And I think that hey there, we have a Kochoroth in the chat, by the way. Thank you so much for joining Twitch because you enjoy our content. And it's interesting. First of all, there's some parallels. We see Beren and Luthien obviously with Aragorn and Arwen, but also a little bit with Faramir and Éowyn, in the sense that Faramir and Éowyn are the most like J.R.R. Tolkien and Edith Tolkien, spending time in the hospital while he was sick with trench fever and just falling more and more in love with each other. But in the end, he's the one that makes the decision, the final decision, that Aragorn will be the king. And his father was going to say no. And his father, I mean, we could say that he was morally wrong. He was not willing to give up his power, this and that. But he did have that right to say no as the ruling steward. But he's gone. And now Faramir believes that he is giving up his power. He thinks he's not going to be the steward anymore, and Aragorn has to tell him, no, the office of the steward will continue. So this really shows how much he believes in Gondor and returning to its glory. The return of the king is that he's willing to step down and be just, Joe Schmo from Ithilien, and has to be told, no, you still get to be the steward.
And a prince.
And that's on top of it, And we see that with characters that are sort of willing to give it all up for what they believe in. Beregond. Let me bring him up really quickly. Beregond had to fight and kill some soldiers of Gondor to defend Faramir. Beregond abandoned his post because he believed he was doing the right thing, and by the laws of Gondor, his punishment was to be exile. And in one of these moments that shows us Tolkien's personality, especially his sense of humor, where Aragorn says to you, I have to send you out of the city, but you're going to go to Ithilien and be with the prince. And he was just sort of messing with him, like, yeah, no, I gotta kick you out of Minas Tirith, but hey, you're gonna get to be a knight to the prince in Ithilien.
I thought all of it was such a great touch.
Be with him, but be his greatest defender.
Mm-hmm.
So he is like Boromir and like Sam, Beregond.
Yeah.
And he's taking that role for the rest of his life for Faramir. And also in all of this, that central line of what Frodo sees in Faramir, and Faramir says, there's this lack of self, the humility, self-centeredness and the humility and ego. And there's also Faramir saying, I never kill without need, and I never, the words aren't exactly, but I never enjoy doing it. It always grieves me. And the only other character who's 100% like that is Gandalf.
I would say Aragorn is there too.
I think Aaron got a few kicks when it was orcs.
Well, okay, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, but
it
is the essential quality of pity and mercy, to use Gandalf's words.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You're hitting. Okay. You're hitting on what I said earlier about Faramir as Tolkien's mouthpiece, specifically for, war. Sometimes it is necessary. Sometimes we must fight. It doesn't mean we have to enjoy. It doesn't mean we have to become warlike. Boromir, his biggest flaw was that he was married to his sword. That's not necessarily a bad thing, to be so loyal and so into, defending things. But he didn't see any solution to any problem that wasn't war. He saw the ring only as a weapon, and in his mind, I'm not saying that he's dumb, but I'm saying he has a linear viewpoint. If it's a weapon, if Sauron could use it, then we could use it. And then he has Elrond shouting him down, and Gandalf shouting him down, and all these guys, and then he has this rant that it's almost like this Twitter storm against Frodo, where he's like, oh, all these wizards and these intellectuals, maybe they're not so great, and then he loses his mind and tries to take the ring.
Yeah, it was his weak point, but again, it comes from a strength, but a very human strength of those who are not as deeply blessed with the elvish lineage that comes through Luthien to Nuviel and is renewed through Arwen. And that's the whole transition of culture, of the great gift of our magical and leadership qualities of those blessed by elvish connection or connection to the Maiar brings to humanity, and Tolkien is elevating in us by passing on the Red Book of Westmarch. And that's what brings us to this age and what we can learn from Sam and Boromir and Baragond at one level, and Faramir and Frodo
And Sam
at another level, and Aragorn and Gandalf at an even higher level.
And I'm glad you brought up the Elvish connection again. I was going to comment it on earlier, and I kind of forgot to do so. And somebody in the chat, Cartfroth there, just said it's something that the humans learned from the elves. And you mentioned Faramir's mother. We don't get to know really her. She died, before the Lord of the Rings started. She was very, very young too. But the one thing that we get from her, and I think this is so elvish, it's like she is a descendant of Mithridates, in some distant relation to Amroth, the king of Lothlorien. She missed the sea. She fell in love with Denethor. She was from Dol Amroth, which is by the sea. She comes to live in Osgiliath. She comes to live in Minas Tirith, and it's just sort of depressing to her. She misses the sea, and she actually becomes sick and dies from the sea longing. And that is the little bit of elf in her, I think.
Vilas, if I remember her name right. Correctly.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
With 5 minutes left, Matt, go ahead, because I once again I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel like we're not giving you enough time here.
I'm good. No, I'm good. I mean, I said my piece, and I think we kind of explored. It was kind of cool to hear all that, because those little aspects of connections between those four characters is not often discussed. It's something that rolls around in the back of my head sometimes, but it never gets discussed on shows like this. So that's really cool.
I haven't had the opportunity to talk about Baragond in a long time either.
Yeah,
that came up.
It's really good writing.
Hold on, because
really good.
Because Sid stepped away, I'm going to just go over here. Because he stepped away, so I just want to make sure that, hey Wayne, that I give him a little. I think he has to go to like the bathroom or something. But I think I agree with Sid's entire. He used the word thesis. I think that is the correct word. That Faramir is an important. He's not the linchpin, but he is a linchpin in Tolkien's work. I think the linchpin is Tuor, and I mean I wrote about 50 pages of that. But there are other linchpins, and I think Faramir is incredibly important. And what's wild to me is that if the early drafts had gotten out, if Tolkien wasn't such a procrastinator and perfectionist, and he had perhaps written something more like the early drafts, Faramir would have basically just not become much of anything, because Eowyn would have married Aragorn. And Faramir wouldn't get this grand ending that he gets. I don't know, maybe Faramir could have married Idis or something, that character that got deleted.
What I really like, I agree, but what I really like about Faramir's touch to this whole thing, including the Jackson team's application of the character, and I think a lot of the interpretation that the actor had for the movie as well, is that
Sid's coming back.
Faramir just captures so nicely the attitude of old Numenor, the faithful aspect of old Numenor brought forward into the late Third Age, and I just feel it, and I sense it. I even see it in Tolkien's writing, and I just think that's a cool aspect of it.
You just tickled something in my brain, and as Sid is coming back, and we're just about out of time here for this section, but I wanted to say that here's an aspect that we didn't come about, and Matt just sort of awoke it in my brain, is that he is the only person in Middle-earth that knew the true nature of Gandalf and his true name.
That's really cool stuff.
Really cool stuff.
Well, I think you mean in the South, because certainly.
Well, I mean mortal men.
Mortal men.
Well, other than Aragorn, who was, you know, who was
Well,
told the whole story.
when was he told? I mean, he didn't know him as a Loren from the West, he knew him as Mithrandir and Gandalf. He was a friend, whereas Faramir was a student. I think that's an important distinction.
I see it differently. I'd have to look up notes, but I believe that Aragorn was a complete disciple, and he learned everything about Gandalf that Gandalf was willing to share, and that Elrond knew.
Yeah.
So I see it differently.
Yeah.
But I agree with you.
It is just interesting that the first time we hear the name Olorin is from Faramir.
Yeah, and really cool. And I'll also say that unlike every character in every story by Tolkien, we all sometimes have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's why as you were walking away, I was like, "Oh, let me put the BRB screen to hide the webcams while you're away," you know.
But just to be clear, it's an obvious omission, but there are a lot of ordinary things that must be happening. Many more meals than are depicted, and bio breaks, and all of that. My wife calls it the magic disappearing ponies, because when they're going through the old forest, it's like sometimes they're hauling ponies out of rifts, and sometimes the ponies just aren't mentioned at all for hours at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at one point they kind of wandered off, and Bombadil managed to gather them together. But yeah, and then of course at Bree they lose all of those ponies. All right, so Matt, we're going to give you 2 minutes to intro your section here. So go ahead.
Well, guys, I want to go to the old book. I want to go to the Silmarillion. I want to talk about the coolest, best written, most poetically written, most beautiful, most powerful paragraphs or two in the Silmarillion. The ones that we both, like all three of us, we like to write about, think about, like to reread and just go, my gosh, that is really so deep and so powerful with what's being said in there. And I got a couple of ideas myself, and I'm wondering if there's things in the Silmarillion, because most people, as you know, they've got experience with the movies and they've got experience with the books. Silmarillion is a whole different thing, and I'm wondering, what you guys would bring to the table as far as your best passages that you can think of in the Silmarillion.
Okay, let me set us up 30 minutes here. I have one right away, if you don't mind me starting, Matt.
Yeah, I'd love you to.
Okay, so for me, because the Silmarillion's writing style is of a chronicle, it's not so much a story, is that it's something where stories can be told of it, but there are parts of it that hit really, really hard. And I'm going to avoid the obvious stuff from the Children of Húrin, because that's that's my favorite story. But the one that immediately came to mind is from Akallabeth, which is the Second Age, the fall of Númenor. And it's the description of not only Númenor falling, but the dichotomy between Sauron sitting in the temple, falling into the abyss, laughing because he knows he's won and this is going to hurt, but he's going to be fine. He's going to come out of it, and he believes all the Númenóreans will be gone. He doesn't know about the faithful in Middle-earth. And then going over to Tarmiriel, trying her best to climb Mineltarma. She's the faithful queen. She should have been the queen. And then the description of the severe loss. We could talk about, and I know Sid likes to point out, about how even before Sauron came to Númenor, it was a fallen land. They had lost their faith. They were doing some pretty bad things. Sauron just made it worse. They were burning men in the temple and all this stuff. But there was still this sense of loss. All of it going down, and I was saying the wives, the daughters, the poetry, the paintings, the sculptures, and he goes on for like a paragraph of all the things that are being lost, and he says it is all gone forever. And if you could read that and not feel like, whew, that's heavy, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
How about you, Sid?
Do you want to look it up and read?
Actually, yeah. I do. I can bring that up rather quickly because I always have a PDF Silmarillion ready to go. Do you want me to bring that up right now?
Because that's kind of my idea for the segment is that we actually talk about the passage and pull it and make comments if you can.
Yeah, I could do that, no problem.
Direction, and I'm getting my favorite right now.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right. I have it right here. But the land of Aemon and Erisea of the Eldar were taken away and removed beyond the reach of man forever. And Andor, the land of gift Numenor of the kings, Elena of the Star of Yarendil, was utterly destroyed. For it was nigh to the east of the greatest rift, and its foundations were overturned, and it fell, and it went down into darkness, and is no more. And there is not now upon earth any place abiding where the memory of a time without evil is preserved. For Iluvatar cast back the great seas west of Middle-earth, and the empty lands east of it, and new lands and new seas are made, and the world was diminished, for Valinor and Erisea were taken from it in the realm of hidden things. In an hour unlooked for by men, this doom befell, on the 39th day since the passing of the fleets. Then suddenly fire burst from the Meneltarma, and there came a mighty wind and tumult of earth, and the sky reeled, and the hills slid, and Numenor went down into the sea, with all its children, and its wives, and its maidens, and its ladies proud, and all its gardens, and its halls, and its towers, its tombs, and its riches, and its jewels, and its webs, and its things painted and carven, and its laughter, and its mirth, and its music, its wisdom, and its lore, they vanished forever. And last of all the morning wave, green and cold, plumed with foam, climbing over the land, took to its bosom Tar-Miriel the queen, fairer than silver or ivory or pearls. Too late she strove to ascend the steep ways of the Meneltarma to the holy place, for the waters overtook her, and her cry was lost in the roaring of the wind. That's where I would choose to stop there.
That's some great stuff, man.
It stays with me, that part. I think it's just, it's one thing to say, it's an analog to Atlantis, and so we know what happens, and it just falls and done. And they were bad people anyway. But then he's pointing out all these things that were not so bad that are lost. Tar-Miriel, the best of them all,
Yeah. That's great, John.
Thank you.
Can you give a citation to the page in the Silmarillion? Is that too much to ask?
Oh, the page? Sure, yeah. That is pretty much the last page of Akalabeth. Actually, it's like the second to last page. That is page. Oh, look at this. My digital copy does not have page numbers on it. I would have.
But you're right, though. It is like the It's like the last. It's like the second to the last page.
Yeah, it's right there at the end. There's a little bit left, and then it goes into of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. For some reason, my digital copy does not have the page numbers.
About page 280 for you, John.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I could have gone and gotten the hardcover, but it's on the other side of the room. Sid, do you have? If you could just, before you even read it, tell us which part it is.
First of all, John, I agree with everything you said about the effect of that passage, and I'm still shuddering.
It's heavy, right? Like, it's crazy.
And therefore, I'm going to go to the opposite end. I'm going from the end to the beginning. I'm in the very beginnings of Arda, in the chapter of Aule and Yavanna.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm speaking specifically, actually, about Yavanna and Manwë. And that is what I will read. And but that whole chapter, this is where you see the Valar as people. The Yavanna, Aule and Yavanna as a distant, deeply loving but distant, and at times Yavanna feeling abandoned, husband and wife, the very humanity of them. There's also a deep theme, and it comes up twice, about how the Valar, they are musicians in the Song of the Ainur, both vocalists and instrumentalists, who have been trained to be by the Creator to be creative, to create a work larger and greater than what like brilliant musicians in an orchestra playing a score. That's exactly how it's described. And two examples of this are that Melkor Morgoth created great storms to tear the world apart, and as a result, we have snow, water rising into the air, falling down in a way no one had ever imagined. And this is an example of how all ill things are turned to beauty and good in the end, the essence of eucatastrophe in God's creation. And there's one other one, and that's the one I'm going to read. Hang on, I've got to hold the button down and pick up the book at the same time. Give me a moment.
While you're looking through that, let me.
I've got it. I'm ready to go. So Manwe is speaking to Yavanna about the heaviness in her heart and says, "But why dost thou ask? For thou hast no need of the teachings of Aule." Then Yavanna was silent and looked into her own thought, and she answered, "Because my heart is anxious, thinking of the days to come. All my works are dear to me. It is not enough that Melkor should have. Is it not enough that Melkor should have marred so many? Shall nothing that I have devised be free from the dominion of others? And if thou hadst thy will, what wouldst thou reserve?" said Manwe. "Of all thy realm, what dost thou hold dearest?" "All have their worth," said Yavanna, "and each contributes to the worth of the others. But the Kelvar can flee or defend themselves, whereas the Alvar that grow cannot. That would be animals and plants. And among those I hold trees dear. Long in the growing, swift shall they be in the felling, and unless they pay toll with the fruit upon bough, little mourned in their passing. So I see in my thought, would that the trees might speak on behalf of all things that have roots, and punish those that wrong them." "That is a strange thought," said Manwe. "One of my favorite things ever said by a Vala." "Yet it was in the song," said Yavanna. "For while thou were in the heavens, and with Ulmo built the clouds and poured out the rains, I lifted up the branches of great trees to receive them, and some sang to Iluvatar amid the wind and the rain." Then Manwe was silent, and the thought of Yavanna that she had put into his heart grew and unfolded, and it was beheld by Iluvatar. Then it seemed to Manwe that the song rose once more about them, and that he heeded how many things therein that though he had heard them, he had not heeded it before. And at last the vision was renewed, but now it was not remote, for he was himself within it, and yet he saw that all was upheld by the hand of Iluvatar, and the hand entered in, and from it came forth many wonders that had until then been hidden from the hearts of the Ainur. Then Manwe awoke, and he went down to Yavanna upon Azelahar, and he sat beside her beneath the two trees. And Manwe said, "O Kelimentari, Eru has spoken, saying, do then any of the Valar suppose that I did not hear all the song, even the least sound of the least voice? Behold, when the children awake, then the thought of Yavanna will awake also, and it will summon spirits from afar, and they will go among the Kelvar and the Alvar, and some will dwell therein, and be held in reverence, and their just anger shall be feared. For a time, while the firstborn are in their power, and while the secondborn are young. But dost thou not remember, Kementari, that thy thoughts sang not always alone? nor did thy thought and mine meet also, so that we took wing together, and the great birds that soared above the clouds. That also shall come to me by the heat of Iluvatar, and before the children awake, there shall go forth with wings like the wind the eagles of the lords of the west. Then Yavanna was glad, and she stood up, reaching her arms toward the heavens, and she said, High shall climb the trees of Kelimentari, that the eagles of the king may house therein. But Manwe rose also, and it seemed that he stood to such a height that his voice came down to Yavanna from the paths of the winds. Nay, he said, only the trees of Aule will be tall enough. In the mountains the eagles shall house, and hear the voices of those who call upon us. But in the forest shall walk the shepherds of the trees. Then Manwe and Yavanna parted for that time, and Yavanna returned to Aule, and he was in his smithy, pouring molten metal into a mold. Arrow is bountiful, she said. Now let thy children beware, for there shall walk a power in the forest whose wrath they will arouse at their peril. None the less, they will have need of wood, said Ale, and he went on with his smith work.
And that was the end of that chapter.
Yes.
As soon as you said...
It starts on page 45.
Okay.
Let me say one other thing. I read that carefully just now, and this explains not only the spirit eagles and the eagles of the Misty Mountains and the Ents, but also the little things like the Beornings, the talking fox that sees Frodo and Sam leaving the Shire.
It explains a lot.
All of that explained right here.
When you had said that it was of Aule and Yavanna, I immediately knew it was that part, because that part is so beautiful. And you said something interesting about the way that Yavanna feels neglected, and it's not merely by her husband Aule, but also just in general. I feel like she comes to Manwe and she says, I feel like I have no part in the song. I feel like what I've created is just for the use of everyone else, and it is just commodities, and can't my children be appreciated for their beauty and their majesty as they are, and not be used as materials for weapons and for houses and such? And the answer is, I heard every note. I heard every thought. I got you.
And that answer is from Iluvatar himself, not
High Elves.
Not just Manwe.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Manwe's reaction was, well, that's weird.
Yeah, his first reaction, yeah.
That's weird.
That's weird.
Yeah, there's another piece, but he does honor it, and he goes back into the song and unites with Eru to have creation manifest that more deeply, which is just beautiful. And there's one other thought in that. This now points to the origin of Radagast's. Radagast never went astray. He just departed from his quest because he was too much like
Yavanna.
Yeah. He wanted to be. His job was to be there and cherish everything as it was. He just didn't fit the job of being the enemy of Sauron.
Two thoughts. The first is that one thing that I love is your observation of this chapter being where we see them as personalities, the Valar, not as gods, which is not something that Tolkien intended for us to see them as gods, but as people with their own personalities, because other than Aule and Yavanna and Morgoth, we don't know much of the personalities of the Valar. Maybe we might say Namo is very stern and implacable, and Manwe is very thoughtful, and Tolkis is sort of a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. But we don't get to see them bicker like that too often, this old married couple, so to speak. The other thing, because you mentioned Radagast, and people ask me all the time, why is Gandalf the only one that gets to go back? What did Radagast really do so wrong? And I said, well, look, it's not that he did anything wrong. I think Yavanna's happy that he's out there.
And we know that go back at some point. Remember,
Well, we do know.
they're ultimately,
We do know.
Because from
they're
the letters
From the letters.
Oh, what does it say specifically about Radagast?
that Gandalf was the only one that made it back.
I think that means in bodily form, but
Oh,
once
that's
the
true.
mission,
That could be true.
I would say is that once the mission is complete, an unfallen Istar can simply become a full-blown Maya again and travel at will.
That is possible, but I think if that's true, I don't think it is personally, but Radagast, like I said, Yavanna would be happy he's out there. He disappeared from Rosgobel before even the end of the story, and no one really knew where he went, just like no one knew where the blue guys went, and I feel like he's out there doing Yavanna's work.
I bet he visits Tom sometimes, and Goldberry even more so.
I would think so. Okay, well, Matt, this was your segment, and I'm sure you have an absolutely fantastic part of the Silmarillion to read to us.
Oh, you guys really did nice in this segment, by the way. Those were beautiful, and I just want to touch on something real quick that Tid said, and that is when Manwë says, "Well, that's a strange thought," and it was in the music also that all of the Valar had their own contributions to the music that were unique and special unto themselves, and so this was a hearkening back to those earlier chapters in the Ainulindale that were talking about how a lot of the every one of the Valar had their own contribution and didn't quite have an understanding of any of the others. So this comes through in Manwë's semi-startled reaction to what Yavanna is saying, and I think that's really a cool touch to that needs to be pointed out.
Because Iluvatar said something along the lines of each and every, and it wasn't just the Valar, it was all of the angels, and even the ones that didn't go to the world. And he said, each of you is going to see parts of your thought in the world, and Melkor, you're going to see all of it.
Yeah. So my section is coming.
Wait, hold on. Sid has a thought.
Oh, sorry.
Very short. And not only the angels. It is essential to everything that I believe this is about, is that the gift that was called Elvish magic was transmitted to us, and we have our own gifts from Eru, and that our own faithfulness, our own sub-creation has two forms in human life. One is sub-creating worlds, as Tolkien did with Middle-earth, and the other is sub-creating the world we live in if we step up as faithful people, making good lives, whether our role is like Sam, Rosie, and 7 children, or
13.
13. Sorry, I lost count.
so did Sam.
Yeah. Or being, good thinkers, good scholars, business people, warriors, anything. If we live faithfully as human beings, we are carrying forth that very quality of what it means to be a child of God, as a mortal as well. Amortal rather than immortal, that is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Matt, which section are we pulling from?
Guys.
I'm on pins and needles here.
Okay, we're gonna go the Flight of the Noldor from page 210 to page 217. I'm not going to read all of it. I'm only going to read 2 segments of it. But for the people who are on the show tonight watching, this is page 210 to 217, and it's.
Wait, hold on. You're not going to read 7 pages, are you?
No, I just said I'm not going to read all 7.
Okay.
But I'm saying, what I am saying that if you want to read this, you read those 7 pages, and
absolutely
well worth the read. This is Feanor having the Noldor listen to him why he wants to leave Valinor and go to Middle-earth, and he's giving this is a couple of excerpts from his speech, and they are so great. And so I'm going to start on page 211, the paragraph that begins, "Here once was light." where he's talking basically about how they're now in the dark and they want to leave and they can't be protected by the Valar anymore. And so this is how it starts on this particular paragraph here. Here once was light that the Valar begrudged to Middle Earth. But now dark levels all. Shall we mourn here, deedless forever, as shadow folk, mist haunting, dropping vain tears in the thankless sea? Or shall we return to our home in Quevenin, sweet ran the waters under unclouded stars, and wide lands lay about, where a free people might walk. There they lie still and await us, who in our folly forsook them. Come away, let the cowards keep the city. It goes on to say, long he spoke. And then the next paragraph is, then Fëanor swore a terrible oath. But I'm going to move forward all the way to page 216.
Matt, could I, since the Silmarillion does not contain the actual wording of the oath, could I grab it for you from the peoples of Middle-earth?
Sure.
Okay, real quick. Be he foe or friend, be he foul or clean, brood of Morgoth or bright Vala, elder or Maior aftercomer, man yet unborn upon Middle-earth, neither law nor love nor league of swords, dread nor danger nor doom itself, shall defend him from Fëanor and Fëanor's kin. Whoso hideth or hoardeth or hand taketh, finding keepeth or afar casteth a Silmaril, this swear we all, death we will deal him, ere day's ending. Woe unto worlds and our world, hear thou, Iru All-Father. To the everlasting darkness doom us, if our deed faileth. On the holy mountain hear and witness, in our vow remember Manwë and Varda. I'm sorry, that was actually Morgoth's ring, not the peoples of Middle-earth.
Yeah, that is the oath, and that's in the middle, and that's in the middle of this section also. I'm moving forward to 216 now, and this paragraph begins in a retort to what we believe is possibly Eowyn, or possibly a personal messenger of Mandos, or Mandos himself. I kind of lean towards a messenger. I kind of lean towards this is Eowyn.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I think it is Eowyn.
I think it's Mandos.
I just want readers and listeners to know that when Mandos tells Eowyn to send a message to the departing Noldor, that's not going to be a good message.
No.
So here's the warning, and they have already started to leave, and Fëanor listen to the threat.
They've already for to give context is they've already committed the first kinslaying as well.
Yeah, they're being told they're not coming back. And Fëanor says this. But Fëanor laughed, and spoke not to the herald, but to the Noldor, saying, So, then will this valiant people send forth the heir of the king alone into banishment, with his sons only, and return to their bondage? But if any will come with me, I say to them, is sorrow foreboded to you? But in Aman we have seen it. In Aman we have come through bliss to woe. Other now we will try, through sorrow to find joy, or freedom at the least. Then turning to the herald he cried, Say this to Manwë Sulimo, high king of Arda. If Fëanor cannot overthrow Morgoth, at least he delays not to assail him, and sits not idle in grief. And it may be that Eru has set in me a fire greater than thou knowest. Such hurt, at the least, will I do to the foe of the Valar, that even the mighty in the ring of doom shall wonder to hear it. Yea, in the end, they shall follow me. Farewell. What I love about the end of that is he's basically predicting, he's foretelling that he's going to assail Morgoth in Middle-earth. And in the end, the Valar will find out that they are going to have to actually take him on in Middle-earth and follow him into Middle-earth and attack him and and destroy his presence in Middle Earth. And as we know, that actually ends up happening.
Well, at least Aonwa went.
This,
Hold on, Matt. Let us get some.
He went, but he brought a lot of Maya. It wasn't just
the
Vanyan.
Let's hold on. Let's because we don't have much time. I'll get to you in a moment. So just three things. One, I love the emotion you put into that reading. Two, me and Sid were kind of making an assumption. I thought it was going to be the doom of Mandos, and that's why I think, Sid, you said that you believe that was a Mandos himself. I thought you were reading from a later part, so that was my mistake. And also, it's interesting how Feanor's words here are really Morgoth's words. It's just the thoughts that have been put into his head, and nobody hated Morgoth more than Feanor, and here he still is speaking his words. It's a really thought-provoking passage. Sid?
I want to say two things as my final comments because I know we're almost out of time.
We have 2 minutes.
Number one.
We have 2 minutes.
Yeah. Number one, in the passage you read, or very near it, Feanor also says, and what we do will be remembered in story and song. And this is related to the theme I'm saying. If Feanor had not done what he did, the Third Age never would have ended the way it did. The Red Book of Vestmarch would never have been written, and Tolkien never would have found it and translated it for us.
That's actually
completely
right.
The most important thing in the history is the continuation of the story that teaches us how to be faithful humans. That is what the immortals could not see because they never lost their faith. And this is the story of eucatastrophe again and again and again, renewing humanity and the world into what it is ultimately meant to be. And we are still a part of that. And it is because Feanor took that oath and took action in a way that only a non-Ainur could. Only the new children of Iluvatar, the elves and men or humans, correcting Tolkien there, could possibly have done. And the other thing I want to say, I really am so glad that among the three of us, we just covered the beginning, the middle, and the end of the Silmarillion. So those folks who don't like to read books anymore, you got the shortest possible version tonight. And I really enjoyed tonight and how we all shared it with all of you. Thank you.
That was a fun segment, man. Perhaps we should do that again
I would say one last thing.
Go ahead.
For anybody who's interested in looking at the segments that we had in the show tonight, they should do that. Even if they're not going to read the Silmarillion, the 8 pages that I just kind of talked about are pound for pound solid gold. A lot of the ones we talked about are, but the actual Doom of Mandos that I did not read has to be read too. So it's just really, really good.
Well, for those of you that follow the channel here on Twitch and also on YouTube, I do readings. We are currently doing the Fellowship of the Ring, although we're going to plan to go through the entire. We did the Hobbit already. We're going to go through the entirety of the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion after that, and Unfinished Tales, and I have a lot to read, is what I'm saying. And I do begin all of my question and answer videos with a reading. The most recent one was from Tolkien's his what do you call it? Translation of Beowulf. That was actually requested by somebody. They asked me to read a little Beowulf for them. And I love that, in his translations, by the way, we see a common theme that he does put a little bit of himself into them. In both Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and in Beowulf, which are the 2 translations that he finished and were published later on, he always does this. Whenever the term Midgard is used, he translates it as Middle Earth, and I think he probably had a big smile on his face when he wrote that down. But that is the last segment here. So we're going to go into our final thoughts here. Sid, final thoughts on everything from today.
Well, just a note on what you just said. The Tolkien could not publish his scholarship in his lifetime because it was rejected by the academic community. The type of writing he did was not acceptable scholarship until the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
He was a generation ahead in saying scholarship must be precise, careful, and accurate, and as close as error-free as possible, but it must also include our humanity. And this is why his scholarly works couldn't even be published, and his creative works couldn't be acknowledged as literature until long after his death.
Until he was. I just answered on Quora today. Thank you, Alice. Just why did Tolkien never win the Nobel Prize for Literature? And I said, he was nominated 4 times, and they rejected him 4 times. I mean, the first time it was before the Lord of the Rings was even fully out. The Return of the King hadn't been published. I can understand. They gave it to Ernest Hemingway that year. Then 3 more times, and the most interestingly one, it was in 1961. He was nominated by C.S. Lewis, and not only did they reject him, but the Nobel panel said that he's second rate, and he didn't really contribute anything to literature. His prose is bad, and it was basically like, but it's fantasy. And it's exactly what you said, that this sort of thing wasn't taken seriously until the 80s, and even his translations of things like Beowulf or Sir Gawain and the Green Knight wouldn't see until way later after his death. It's just kind of wild that there was a time where people just thought of him as pulp fiction.
There's a very interesting epilogue to that. In the 1800s, the most read novel in English was Ben-Hur, which is a Christ story. And it became the most famous, well-watched movie of the 20th century.
Yeah, Charlton Heston.
Tolkien's work was another, one can argue it is another Christ story. And it was the most read novel of the entire 20th century. And it became the most watched movie of the first decade of the 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something ancient and ever renewed that goes beyond the small minds of the intellectuals into the heart of creativity.
And thank you, Laurel, as well. And by the way, Laurel, we'll have to do this at some point. I'll have to read out a little bit for her. Maybe, in my next video, I think, Laurel was saying that her favorite passage from the Silmarillion was when Luthien put Morgoth to sleep, and I love that too. Matt, final thoughts here.
I'm going to tell everybody right now, I think we should do another one of these segments, because I kind of personally want to stay in the Silmarillion, but another segment of these short 2 or 3 paragraph readings is so awesome, I think, and I think we should do it in the future. But tonight was a great show, and I just want to say thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. Sid and John, good seeing you.
Absolutely.
Sid,
well, Matt, you get a half-hour segment every month, and you could use it for if you want to do that again. It's up to you to do that again. I would be happy with that. I thought it was a lot of fun, and we got to talk about some great themes. Last thing before we go, plugs. Obviously, you guys are already here on my Twitch channel, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you're on my YouTube channel. Follow me on Quora as well. I'm John Ciara on there. Matt is Loremaster on Quora, and also go to loremaster.com. There's links to all of this in the description. Sid is Sid Kemp on Quora, and also on AO3 Archive of Our Own, where he writes some great short, punchy Tolkien-related fan fiction. And also, if you had any questions about Buddhism, go to Quora and ask there, and he'll answer that as well. So, yeah. And, what's interesting, Koshroth here says Ben-Hur can't hold a candle to J.R.R. Tolkien. Inconceivable.
Here.
I agree and disagree. I think Ben-Hur is great as well. There are many fantastic novels out there. I'm a big fan of Dracula too. That's one of my favorite novels as well. But anyway, I'm gonna stop the recording part here, and we'll just do the whole stream ending part. So let's go over to here as we head off into the Grey Havens, and I will say goodbye to everyone on YouTube, because this is where the video ends.